All right, guys, we're live, and we've got Evan here from Radio Made Easy. Uh, Evan, it's good to see you. Good to talk to you
Yes,
again.
sir. Thanks for
We
having me.
No problem. It's good. I've been wanting to do this for a little while, but we first met at SRF a few months ago down in Camden, Tennessee, and Evan, kind of tell us who you are, that kind of stuff, and what you've got going.
Yeah, all right. Well, I'm Evan. You guys can check out my site, radiomadeeasy.com. It's pretty new, family run business here. I do the radio stuff. My wife does the shipping and helps me keep things organized, but it's a small operation. Just recently started kind of back in October, SRF or Self Reliance Festival. That was actually the first kind of kickoff for the company. I've been into radio. I was telling somebody a couple days ago. I had a coworker. I worked at a big bank in IT, and had this older guy on our team that was into radios. He had his extra, and he didn't really tell me much about it, but it was enough to pique my curiosity, and I kind of went down the YouTube hole and looked into things. Got my first radio and got licensed, all that stuff, and I didn't do a whole lot with it until I started getting more into firearms training at Tactical Response and met a bunch of guys that we wanted to be able to communicate, not necessarily only for tactical, like more for our local crew, our local community, just as a redundancy. And I became the de facto calm guy, like I was the only guy that knew anything about it. And they immediately jumped all over that. Like they were so excited to find somebody that knew anything. And so I embraced that and kind of learned as much as I could and tried to
And they're
teach
like, they're
them.
like, make Evan do it because he's the one that
Yeah,
said you're
yeah,
it kind of thing, didn't they?
exactly. So I embraced that. And it just so happened I went um, to SOE, John and Amanda's shop up in Camden where they hosted the event. I went there a few weeks prior, or just a few months prior to that event, and um, we were talking. A buddy of mine was helping people buy gear at the previous SRF, nylon gear. They were buying stuff from John. He was checking them out, and they kept bringing radios of John's up to the checkout, thinking that they could buy them. And he was like, man, there's a pretty good business opportunity here. So I was like, well, yeah, I could program them for people. I could maybe do an online course. I could pick all the right stuff, take all the guesswork out of it. I mentioned it to John, and he's like, yeah, that's a great idea. You won't do it. And I did. So I made good on my idea. I showed up and did it, and it was a hit. I sold out of everything at the show and made a bunch of cool connections. But basically, the mission is to empower people to use their radios, right? Like I got sick of hearing this story of all these preppers and all these tac guys who have radios. They never taken them out of the box and never used them. Or if they have, it's been like just as walkie talkies, around the house on simplex. They've never learned anything. And it really frustrated me because I know the value of it. And I kind of just on that mission to bridge that gap, get people what they need to get started to use them effectively. So we sell turnkey packages. So you buy a radio, comes ready to use, all your local repeaters, all the emergency frequencies, all the NOAA weather stations, everything ready to go. If you order multiples, they all match, right? So you can tell your friends, go to channel 10, everybody's going to be on the same thing. And we upgrade the antennas, make sure you have good quality accessories, that kind of stuff. So we carry everything from cheap Baofengs all the way up to high-end Yaesus, for handhelds, all the way up to mobile units. So it's kind of it's growing and building, and I'm creatively figuring out what people want and trying to build packages around that. But that's kind of how it got started and where it's at today.
Now, oh yeah, and now Evan, with if you've got a bigger group of people, if say for instance our guys with Kentucky Sustainable Living come in and say, Evan, we want some, and I know you sell a lot of the TYT 9800s.
Yep.
If we come in and say, hey, we've got 25 people that want to buy the radio from you, and we want them all programmed the same. You can do that and set us up something that way to where all of them are programmed the same then?
Yeah, they've done that for a lot of teams like that. I just did a crew of 16 people at a community in Tennessee exactly that way. They actually sent me some of their radios and bought some from me too. Again, they kind of fit that role of they already bought the radios, but they don't know what to do with them, right? Yeah. So but yeah, everything matches, everything is intercompatible. And then I even come out and do training too. So like if you don't know where to get started, you don't know how to hook this stuff up, you don't know how to set up the antennas, or you don't know how to effectively use the radio. I mean, there's even etiquette and, ways to effectively use them even once they're programmed. I can kind of take it, 0 to hero is what I kind of call it, right, on a 2-day course to help people learn. But yeah, those groups of people, that's a big challenge, right? Getting everybody sat down, programming them all the same, testing all your channels to see which ones work the best. That can be really tedious. And sometimes it takes an outsider, right? It's like if you bring somebody from outside your group, they kind of carry a different authority than somebody they know that they see every week or every couple of days that they're sick of hearing about it from, right? A fresh voice. Sometimes that helps too. This is an independent third party on your case instead of me on your case for the 50th time this year, right? So.
Oh yeah, and that set of outside eyeballs is good. Somebody that's not emotionally attached sometimes.
Exactly.
Is really nice to have, because my whole thing with programming the radios and the stuff like that is I was looking at it. Yes, you might not plan on being at my place if we have a grid down situation, but the last thing I want to do is having to fire up the generator or wasting battery power to program a stinking radio.
Sure.
I mean, energy and fuel is going to be precious in a time like that. And I told some of the guys, I'm like, I don't want to have to reprogram your radio when you get here. I was like, let's have them all programmed the same, the first few channels. And actually what I did for a lot of the guys was we programmed, most of them we were programming just Baofengs. So we programmed like the first I think 40 channels or something like that were all the same. And then I took with RF Finder or R Finder. Mm-hmm. I took their location, their address, and I did like a 30-mile radius.
Okay.
A 30-mile radius for repeaters. And then that way, so if somebody ended up at my place, their first 40 channels or so are all the same.
Yeah,
and
like that.
Yeah, I mean that's what we're going to use.
Yeah.
Yeah, and top on here, he said you should say something about license requirements. We can get into the license requirements here in just a little bit. So
now, really, I like what you described there though, because if you have people from different geographies, you need one set of frequencies that are consistent for where you're all going to end up, but then they have their own life. They may be needing to use it 100 miles away. And so I like that plan. That makes a lot of sense to keep kind of sections, right? There's some radios that do that better than others. Like I've got an Anytone 578 mobile that allows you to set up zones. So I can have like 30 zones, and it's just a group. It's a form of grouping for frequencies. So I can have a home group. I could have a Camden, Tennessee group. I could have a Bowling Green, Kentucky group. And then when I'm there, when I scan or when I cycle through, I'm not fighting against all my other stuff, right? It's just only what I need for the moment, not everything. If you've got hundreds and hundreds of repeaters in there. So
that's pretty cool. Hey, Harry said that he finally got the bugs worked out on his freeze dryer. Harry, I'm glad to hear that. My freeze dryer is running right now. My wife and kids wanted to do a batch of candy, so I told them, I was like, go buy some stinking candy and we will run a batch of candy. So I've got a batch of candy running right now.
What kind of candy do you run, like Skittles or?
This is the first actual run. I did Oh, I did the stinking bread run last night. Your first run to get all the
Okay.
bugs worked out.
Okay.
And they got Laffy Taffy, Skittles, the Werther's Original Chews,
Okay.
and gummy bears and peach rings. So we've
Huh.
got a freeze dryer full of them. So
That's cool. A customer of mine just sent me 2 radios I did the Mars mod on a couple of Yaesus, and he sent me a big care package with freeze dried candy. I'd only tried the Skittles, but I got 10 different kinds of freeze dried candy to figure out what the heck it is. And that's bizarre what it does to a piece of candy. It blows it up 10 times as big and
like
changes the whole thing.
Yeah, the gummy bears are freaking like 10 times, like you said, 10 times as big. Like they puff
It's
up.
bizarre.
It's weird. So
I have not yet got a freeze dryer, but it's on my list. That is one incredible piece of machinery.
Oh yeah, it's cool. I think it's going to be a game changer. I'm planning on freeze drying a ton of meat. We're going to, once we start butchering all the meat, a lot of it's going to be freeze dried and just put it up that way. But we'll get in. Let me see. Let's talk about the license requirements real quick. You've got your technician license, which is your first level for ham. That gives you 2 meter, 70 centimeter, and I think it's 1.25 meter is what it is.
Right, that 220 band or right there in the middle. Yeah.
Yeah, and then you've got a little bit of privileges on HF, your 6 meter and your 10 meter. Then once you go, you can get your general license, which that adds on your HF privileges there. Yep. And then your extra class, the extra class, you've still got all the other stuff, but it opens up more bandwidth in the HF frequencies is really what it does.
Yep. Some of the lower portions of those bands you get access to.
Yeah, and supposedly, I've just got my general license, but supposedly you can it's not near as crowded once you get your extra class because it opens up the bandwidth. That's what one of my buddies was telling me. You got more room to play essentially. So
yeah, I mean fewer people in the pool, so to speak, so more room to play.
And then of course you got your GMRS license. License. You can essentially get on the FCC website, give them, what is it, $60 now or something.
It's only $35 now. They reduced it, which I don't know. I don't know that the government's ever reduced the price of anything, but that's the first time I've heard. So
they just raised something else.
Yeah,
so.
Yeah.
But
so I'm actually a huge fan of getting people started on GMRS because it is UHF. So it is a part of the same part of the radio spectrum as your technician's license covers. So it works in a similar way. Some of the same radios can be made to work on GMRS. So I won't go into the BS about what's legal and what's not, but it's literally a couple megahertz away from the amateur band. So the way the radio works, learning to use it's all the same, right? So it's a great way to get started. And in my area, I have 4 GMRS repeaters that I can hit sitting right here.
Really?
And nobody's using them. They're completely silent most of the day. So it's the world's your oyster with that, right? You pay your $35. There's no test. It covers your whole family. So your wife and kids can use it with you. And you can start communicating, right? Like you can start using this stuff. And then if it's an emergency, jump on the ham bands, right? Like if you're not in range for what you need during emergency, you're completely legal to do what you got to do. So I think it's a great way to get your feet wet. And if you like that, and maybe that's enough for you, but if you love it and you want to go deeper, then go get your tech and keep on going through the rest. But we were talking a little bit before. I really am annoyed at the place I'm at. Half the reason I need to exist as a company is because the FCC makes it so hard for people. Because the test is not terribly hard. I'm not tooting my own horn that I was able to pass this test, but it's it's not an easy test, and it's like an entry level electrical engineering degree. Like
Yeah.
you have to know a whole lot of stuff that you're never going to use, right? Like it's just cram and get these questions memorized and pass the test. Go to hamstudy.org. Great guys. They make the antennas that I sell, the super elastic signal stick. That's what funds that software. You can take practice tests, learn everything, memorize everything, and yeah, you can pass it. But then the next day, you can forget literally almost everything you learned, right? Other than maybe what frequencies are allowed and what power levels are allowed. That's just about all you need to remember from what you just spent
And hell,
possibly months of your life trying to learn, right? It's
I keep my
terrible.
cheat sheet with me on when
Right.
I'm running HF, looking at what bandwidth I can stay in.
Oh yeah, you
So
need that. It makes no sense without a cheat sheet. I mean, it's not very logical. So it
oh yeah,
frustrates me just to realize how out of date that test is. It almost assumes that you're going to solder together your own radio,
yeah,
or something like that. It's completely impractical. I think it's a huge. I know it prevents a lot of trouble, and I'm sure that is helpful. Hams don't have to deal with the general population because nobody's going to take the test, so they generally stay out of the way. But um, it's frustrating how, I mean, I can't get any of my guys to even. I've got 9 guys on our local team here that all want to use radios, but they're not going past GMRS. I mean, none of them have the interest to study for a 400 question test pool. They're not going to do it. So
yeah. Oh yeah, and honestly, I have learned so much more actually using the stinking radios than I ever learned looking at the books and studying for the test and everything. I mean,
right.
you essentially you pass you pass the test to learn the stuff after you get your license.
Yep.
So
That's when you're going to learn is using it. So that's why I like GMRS, because you can just start using it, and there's a lot of stuff you'll learn. I mean, I was helping a guy on our team tonight see if his radio worked, and literally down to like how to hold it while you're transmitting is, if you're trying to hit a distant repeater, you might have to hold it in a certain spot really still.
Yeah.
And that's not obvious until you start using it, right? So
oh yeah.
I'm grateful they have something like GMRS where people can, without a test, just get started. And that's really what I've emphasized. I've got a guide on my site of how to get that. If you go to radiomadeeasy.com, there's a GMRS guide in the upper bar that tells you how to get the license, how to apply for it, and a little bit of background. Now, if you don't have repeaters in your area, it's not quite as useful, right?
Yeah.
But
see, there's no GMRS repeaters that I've found
really,
right around us. Yeah, it's just
you
nobody
might
really
need to
uses
make
it.
one.
I've thought about it honestly. We
Yeah.
got one of the biggest farmers, one of the biggest row crop farmers, has his silos probably a half mile away from me, and
That'd be perfect.
I so much want to put a repeater up on the top of his silo, and he would probably let me if I went and
Yeah.
asked him. So,
And if I'm making a decision, like if I'm going to invest the money on a repeater, I'm not putting up a ham repeater because nobody I know is going to be able to use it. So I think GMRS is a great option for a repeater like that. You can get everybody on your crew, except the ones that, are afraid of letting the government know they exist, those
yeah.
guys. But other
as
than that,
as they type on their smartphone.
right.
So,
Yeah. Yeah, if
oh
you're
yeah, for sure.
registered to vote, or if you own anything, you own a registered vehicle or anything like that, then I think you're behind the 8 ball on people knowing you exist. But who am I to tell you?
Oh yeah, but then they might want to be a sovereign citizen and start pulling out all that kind of stuff. So,
Hey, I'm all for it. Go for it.
So, but yeah, I mean, talk to us a little bit. We've done a few comms videos and stuff like that. Me and one of the guys.
Okay.
Talk to us about as far as emergency communications. Your grid goes down, and some of that, and the kind of the importance of not just buying that radio and charging it up and being like, okay, I'm cool. So
yeah, I mean, we've all been in a situation where a cell phone doesn't work, right? And that can be for a couple different reasons. Maybe it's just dead. Maybe you're in a valley or in a piece of rural area that it just doesn't work. A friend of mine got into observed an assault happening on his trash route a few months back. He runs a trash route. Saw a guy kicking his girlfriend to death in the middle of the road. No cell signal. Couldn't do anything. He was able to intervene and stop it, but he had to drive, I think, almost 10 miles to get cell phone signal, right? And that's not a global emergency, right? That's a one person or maybe a 3-person emergency, right?
yeah.
Like, but even in that situation, all the way up to a hurricane evacuation, right? Or something crazy where everybody's on their cell phone and it's not working because it's overloaded. These don't have to be apocalyptic end of the world scenarios. It can be your cell phone's dead, or you don't have signal, you're hiking, you're in a dead zone, any number of things that would make a radio useful, right? So I think, I'm not ruling out that bad things will happen possibly in the future, and we need to be prepared for larger events, but I think it has an application way smaller scale, right? So and then that begs a question in my mind, and I know you've heard this too. It's like, well, I'll figure it out when it's time.
Yep.
When the time comes, I'll put the energy in. Well, we all know, and I think you made that comment when we talked about this before we started, right? It's like the time to learn is not when you're under stress, right?
Yep.
You're not going to rise to the occasion. One of my favorite firearms instructors, James Yeager, said just as much, right, about firearms. Is you're not going to rise to the occasion. You're going to rise to the level of training you've mastered.
Yeah.
So if you haven't trained to the point that it's muscle memory, that it takes no analysis whatsoever, it's an extension of your being to do this thing, you're not going to just rise to the occasion like they do in the movies, right? Like you're not just going to clear that house top to bottom safely, not having done hundreds of hours of building clearing.
Yeah.
I think you talked about like processing a pig, right? Like you're not going to show up with a dead pig and just masterfully cut that thing into sausage and pork chops. You're going to screw it up real bad if it's under stress. So, I mean, that's my philosophy with this is I want people to get started now when times are good, times are comfortable, and get your reps in, right? Learn, figure it out, fall on your face when it's not life or death.
Yeah, I mean,
figure out that you can't really hit that repeater that
yeah,
you thought you could.
Yeah, and right now, I mean, playing around with it, if we play around with it and screw up, oh well, we screwed up for today. It's not life and death. It's
exactly.
It's fun right now, but I mean, you can make it fun and see what you can do with it, and then that way, the whole muscle memory. I mean, I've used my radios before. A couple years ago, I was here at the house, had one of the kids was sick, and I told him, I was like, I've got to go back in the back and do some stuff. I was like, I've got to get it done before the rain comes. I'm like, you're fine in here. I gave him a Baofeng, turned it on on the channel. I took another Baofeng, and I'm like, I mean, this is before, he was younger and no cell phone. Yep. So I was like, call me if you need something. I'll come back up to the house. So
absolutely.
Right there, not hurting anybody. Put it on an FRS frequency. Everything was great. So, I mean, he bugged the crap out of me, though, wanting to talk to me. He thought it was fun, and I'm like, dude, I've got to get something done. And just call me.
I just made a post on Instagram, comms for moms.
Yeah.
So I set my wife up with a nice little Baofeng with an extended battery and the exoskeleton to keep it from accidentally pressing the push to talk. And so she carries it in one of her bags. It fits perfect in this little slot in her bag. And we use it all the time because we got 3 kids. So a lot of times if one of us needs to run in the grocery store, I will stay in the van and while they're asleep, keep circling the parking lot. And when it's time, I roll up and pick her up. Or maybe I go get gas and then I come back and get her or whatever it is. And having a radio, man, it's so much easier than trying to text each other or get a
Yeah.
phone call. Just I hear it. I don't miss the notification. She can get in touch with me immediately. And that's just normal life, right? But imagine there's an active shooter or something. I mean, that would be killer to have that, no pun intended, right? Like that'd be great to have a way to immediately get in touch with somebody and not wait on them to answer their phone and miss the call. I mean, I've missed so many phone calls from having my phone on vibrate or on silent, right? So stuff like that. I love using it in everyday life like that, even when it's not really necessary. Of course, a phone is better in a lot of ways, but
Yeah.
I recognize I'm going to forget how to use this, and so is my wife if we don't use them. So we fit it into our life. So I think like what you did with your son there makes perfect sense, right? If you send your kid out to play, you can tell them it's time for dinner, right? Like send them with a radio. You don't have to yell for them. Just call out on the radio, hey, time to come to dinner. And if that's all that happens, cool. But if
Oh yeah.
somebody falls and breaks a leg, they can get in touch with you and you don't have to hand them $1,000 iPhone so you can
Exactly.
stay in touch. So I love getting it into everyday life like that. And these radios are so cheap. You can buy 10 of them and not be out that much money and just
Oh yeah.
consider it a consumable, disposable thing.
Yeah.
I love it.
Oh yeah. Well, my oldest one a few years ago, I showed him. I was like, "Hey, let's scan through some stuff." And we were sitting down here in the basement, and we heard some kids is in a couple neighborhoods over
Yeah.
behind us. They were playing on their little handheld walkie
Yeah.
talkies, and I was like, "Do you want to talk to these kids?" And he's like, "Yeah." So he started talking to them. They're like, "Who is this? Who is this?" And he's like, "I'm gonna come find you. I know where you live." and these kids are
Yeah.
like, "Oh crap, who is this guy?"
Yeah.
So, but yeah,
Yeah.
I
I
mean,
mean, that's if you're on the FRS frequencies, you probably pick somebody up pretty easy. And that the miracle of that, it's like the same miracle as seeing seeds turn into plants that produce fruit, right? Like it's to press the button on a radio and talk to somebody you can't see. That's a miracle, right? It's like it's amazing. And
oh
I
yeah,
think introducing kids to that is I love seeing the light turn on like, wow, this is really cool. You know, we take it for granted, all the stuff that we use all the time that operates on radio frequencies, but you don't know it.
yeah, and that like I mean, with my brother and my wife, I put a Baofeng and a mag mount antenna and
Yeah.
a card in each one of their vehicles, and I told them I'm like it's a game changer. I told them I was like, think if the cell towers are down, you
Yep.
can't communicate. I said we could be driving within 2 or 3 miles of each other trying to do something and not know it. You know, I could show up at the house
Yeah.
and think that you're here, but you went the other way down the road,
Absolutely.
and I totally missed you. I said, so if we're even with that, you know, the mag mounts, if we can get, you know, 5 to 10 miles
Yeah.
range on those, I'm like, that's a game changer
It
in
is.
coordinating on what to do.
And
So
another piece of it that I think is forgotten often, even by me, is the information gathering.
yes,
So like if you're in, you may never need to hit the transmit button, but you could just sit there and listen to your local repeater and know all about where the riots are happening or what roads are flooded or whatever kind of situation is going on. And you may be able to gather tremendous amounts of intelligence, you know, just by sitting there and listening. And that was
yes,
a fundamental thing I was taught when I first got into radio was listen more than you talk, right? That's how you learn the cadence and the etiquette and all that. But I think it goes for emergencies too. I mean, what are you going to do at night anyway, right? If the grid's down and you're going to read and you can listen to the radio,
yeah,
listen to what people are saying. And you may learn something that might have cost you a 30-minute, it might only take 30 minutes of listening. It might have been a 3-day walk to
yep,
go find out that road is blocked or something like that. So I think and HF is a big piece of that too. Even if you're not going to get licensed, if you're not going to transmit at all, you can listen on HF and hear all around the country what's going on. And
exactly.
that's super valuable. I mean, if there's no internet, it's the next best thing, and it's nowhere near as easy, but it's
Oh
powerful.
yeah. Well, it's like Top said. He said when Estill County flooded, there's a lot of good info on the repeaters.
Really?
That's right there, just sitting there and
Yeah.
listening to the stuff. I mean, I can think of two examples. Uh, when the Nashville bombing happened at the AT&T thing,
Right. Right.
it was last Christmas, I think is
Hmm.
when it was, or two Christmases
And it
ago.
wasn't much of a bombing, right? But I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Like
So
fireworks went off or something.
yeah, I mean, so
Yeah.
the cell network was pretty well toast if you're on
Yep.
AT&T. So I was sitting listening to stuff on the radio, and then when the tornadoes came through Western Kentucky,
Yep.
I was sitting down here and I had the radios on listening to what was
Yep.
going on, and people were reporting in on stuff. So it's a valuable tool to gain information on what's going around you. And the awesome one of the awesome things, or the two awesome things about sitting there just listening, one, you're not using near as much power if you're
That's
on
true.
backup power.
That's
and
true.
then as long as you never push that transmit button, nobody can ever find your butt either.
That's true.
So just sitting there listening, nobody will ever be able to find you unless you push that button.
Yeah, and I think there's a little bit too much of fear mongering about them coming to find you thing. I mean, have you ever done a fox hunt or anything like that where you've tried to direction find somebody?
No, I want to though.
So, I mean, that is an incredibly time consuming and tedious task. I'm not saying there's not stuff we don't know about to track people down. I'm sure there is, but you know, the resources it would take to come find somebody just occasionally transmitting on a radio about, how much water they need or something. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a massive amount of time and resource to go find somebody, and you can't do anything else. You literally have to hunt this thing for days and days and days, possibly, if you don't know where to begin. So I think that's a little overblown, and I think there's this concept of allowed versus able, right? There's things we're allowed to do and there's things we're able to do. Those don't always overlap.
Yeah.
And I think I would err on the side of doing what you need to do for yourself to be prepared to keep you and your family safe and alive, right? So that's why, again, I'm such an advocate for GMRS, because you can get started and learn to use it, and then you can just flip over to those forbidden frequencies in an emergency. You're completely legal. If it's to save, I think the wording is to prevent bodily harm or damage to property or something like that, right? So I think that's a great option. So you're not living in fear of somebody coming to kick your door in because you told your kids it's time for dinner on a 2 megahertz different frequency than what you were allowed to do. It's bizarre to me that that's the kind of fear mongering used to get people not to do things. But
Oh yeah. Well, shoot, I run on Marine a bunch
yeah,
here, and I mean nobody is ever on Marine, and I'm like, shoot, if nobody's even listening to it, I'm going to run it and see what
yeah.
happens. So
You got
no black.
Marine, you got MERS.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's great. And there's another whole movement or a whole bunch of YouTube people that seem to, the commenters out there, maybe some of them are here now, that want to tell people that the FCC knows what radio you're using to transmit, right? So somehow this Chinese made radio has some sort of identification in it. It barely works, but they
Yeah.
went to the trouble to put a unknown signature into it that tells them that it's not allowed to use GMRS. It's like,
Oh yeah.
nobody gives a rip. Allegedly nobody gives a rip. Don't construe this as legal advice, but I'm very doubtful that anyone would be able to determine that you're using a non-GMRS radio on GMRS, right? It's just bizarre, the type of, and I guess what it comes down to is like an elitism of hams not wanting people to come disrupt their playground. And I understand that, because it could be a mess if you just open the doors. But
It'd be
The
like
type
CB.
people we're talking about are not going to cause trouble.
Yeah. Oh, well, you'd wind up like CB is what you'd wind up with.
I don't even know. I've heard that reference, but I've never been exposed to much CB. So I've seen, when I was growing up, people had it in their truck, but that's about it. So
you take a CB down close to a truck stop and you can find all the lot lizards and what parking lot and everything else.
Gotcha. Yeah.
And guys that are peaked and tuned on their stuff and everything else. And it's just, it's nothing but filth most of the time.
Right.
So, hey, Arthur's got a question and you might know better than me. The Baofeng 888S, is it a FRS or GMRS?
I have no idea what that is.
I would say most of the Baofengs will cover any of those frequencies. They should cover FRS and GMRS frequencies.
Those I just Googled them. They look like they're walkie-talkies. So they're UHF walkie-talkies. Oh, maybe not. Yeah, they're UHF only. They're 400 to 470 megahertz. But they don't have a keypad or a display. So I guess they're probably oriented to business. I think that's what a lot of the radios, like even Motorola's that don't have a keypad, they're intended to hand out to people so they don't mess with it, right? You got to program it on a machine.
Yeah.
That's probably what
it's probably only got like 13 channels or something like that.
Where you just click through them. Yeah. There's 16 channels. Yep. So that's what it is. It's like a business radio, basically.
All right.
That UHF band, that portion of the spectrum, sometimes you can get an FCC license for a business, which is another thing we haven't talked about. But, if you're super worried about being legal, you can just go buy a license for a certain frequency for your business and run that.
Yeah.
If money's no object and you just want to solve the problem legally, that's another option. People don't think about that often, but it is possible to just run a business band. You can use encryption and all that on that legally.
Yeah, it gets in your stinking pocket though. That's for sure.
Oh, yeah.
I talked
you
to
get into
Motorola,
you're going to be in the 4 digits per radio.
Oh yeah, I mean it's kind of crazy. I talked to a guy about getting a whole system set up for the whole state of Kentucky, and he's like, "Dude, I can do it." He said, "But how much money do you have?" And I was like, "Probably not enough if you're asking me that question." So,
yeah.
But
yeah, a lot of questions like that. If you have to ask the price you can't afford.
Yeah. So I got shot down real quick. I was like, I'll stick with the ham stuff.
So you wanted to put a whole system in for the whole state of Kentucky, like for anybody or just for your own crew?
Just for our own crew.
Okay, I got you.
And he was like, yeah, he said, we could figure something out, but it's like, it's going to be freaking expensive. And I'm like, nah, just forget that. I was like, I'm not flipping the bill on that one. So, but yeah, I mean, we've kind of been planning with ours, is from community to community, getting as many generals as we can. And then that way we can talk HF, cause you can I can go from one side of the state to the other in Kentucky, north, south, east, or west, easy with HF.
Yep.
Top is in here. We've talked several times on HF, and he was, I think he was 180 to 200 miles straight line from me, and we've made contact several times. So,
with a simple long wire antenna like a dipole, you can make a dipole out of $15 worth of speaker wire and lay it flat on the ground at each place and talk 300-400 miles easy.
Oh yeah. And I mean that the HF setup I've got right now, I put it up with an 8-foot step ladder. So it might be 10 feet off the ground, and I can cover 400-mile radius around my house. No problem at all. So, I mean, we were hitting down south of Atlanta one time, and the guy was like, "Man, you're coming in crystal clear. I can hear you great." Yeah. So
that's a whole new miracle that just makes everybody giddy when I just taught a class where we demonstrated some of that stuff in Ohio. A customer had a property about 50 miles from their residents. They wanted communication, so we set that up on HF with InViz is the name of that antenna deployment. So it's not meant for super long range. It's meant for kind of regional or local HF. But I mean, it was like he was in the other room. I mean, it was crystal clear, 50 miles away, and it not an inexpensive task to endeavor to complete, but it definitely works. So I mean, and that is a miracle to see. Man, just one radio to another radio, no infrastructure, no grid, no cell network, no Wi-Fi, just straight up radio to radio. That's
and that's the cool thing, and that's why I hate relying on repeaters. And I think it's almost a crutch with a lot of people. It's like, oh, I can hit that repeater so I can talk, freaking however far away we want to do and get that repeater. I'm like, let's focus on simplex and let's focus on HF stuff to really get it, because everything with the simplex and the HF, the only stuff that you're required to maintain is stuff that's on your property. That's true. You got to have your radio and a power supply. So as long as you've got a 12-volt power supply that you can replenish, you're not beholden to the system and beholden to somebody else. All these repeaters, they might have a little bit of backup power, but they're not going to have backup power for months and months.
Infinite. Yeah. So you probably know, if you've ever gone down that path, just how expensive it is to have a fully self-sustaining off-grid power solution. I mean, even to run a refrigerator off the grid permanently it's not an easy thing. It's not a cheap thing, at least. You probably need 1,000 watts of solar and 400 amp hours of batteries just to run one refrigerator. So, I mean, I'm sure a repeater uses more power than that, but it's not many people are investing in that kind of infrastructure for a repeater. There might be a few, but not many.
Oh yeah, and that's why, like I said, that's why I like the simplex stuff, and I like messing around with the simplex.
Yeah.
One of our guys in the group, he's got he's got a real high elevation, and he can cover a bunch of the state just on simplex 2 meter, just because of his height and everything. I forgot. I think he said he's 700 and some feet elevation, which is pretty good elevation for here. I mean, everything's fairly flat where we're at. But he said he can cover damn near a quarter of the state or better, I'd say.
That's cool.
So
I just took a mountains trip, and I made a few simplex contacts off the Blue Ridge Parkway.
Yeah.
But people are monitoring the 2 meter nationwide calling frequency, so I just put my call out a couple times on there and got some responses. But I hit a repeater 70 miles away.
Really?
But that's, like you're saying, that's not something you can always count on. The good news is, as long as the world's still spinning and we're doing, things are together and working, I mean, it's a very valuable thing to learn. So I think something you ought to be very familiar with, even down to how do you figure out if it's working or not, right? Like, if nobody answers you, how do you know it's working? A lot of people may not know how to sort that out. You can't just listen on a radio right next to you to see if you're getting in. So there's a lot of coordination. In our class, we tested 50 repeaters one at a time from location from A to B to see who could hear who. Went down the list and checked it off. Had a cell phone call going at the same time, so we could say, all right. And we only had like 7 out of 50 that worked. So now we know, but that took an hour to go drive over there, test them all. But imagine the heartache you save of trying to do that in an emergency. And you don't have a plan either. Which one do you tune into? You going to listen to all 50 of them?
Oh yeah, and we've got we're going to coordinate it. One of the guys that's pretty close to me, we're going to coordinate kind of a TOC, our Tactical Operations Center kind of thing. We're going to do.
Cool.
We're going to kind of do a deal. what we're planning is a bunch of the guys are going to come to my place, probably stay Friday night and Saturday night. We're going to establish radio contact from my shop where I'm going to have a bunch of equipment set up.
Yeah.
We're going to establish comms with the other member of the group. Okay. Make sure we can maintain comms, and then we're going to kind of do a mock scenario of, hey, we need to do a convoy supply run to his place, which I think he's about 30 miles away. So one of our retired military guys, he's going to set up the convoy and talk about a convoy and how to do it. So we're probably not going to go all kitted out, just because if we get pulled over all kitted out, the guys can be like, what the hell are y'all doing? Then we'd have to explain all that.
No, but you don't. You just say, we're just driving.
Yeah, so we're just driving and multicam and everything. Don't worry about us.
That sounds valid to me. I don't know anything illegal about wearing multicam.
Yeah, but we're going to have radio contact between the two different locations, and then the convoy will be set up with radios too. Very cool. And I told him, I was like, we'll probably just go over there, do a mock supply convoy run, hang out for a few hours, eat lunch, and then come back and do it all over again. I said, I told him, I was like, we'll set up 3 to 4 different ways to get to your place. And then you call in and be like, hey, route A is blocked. I just got a call on the radio and heard route A is blocked. You've got to go route B.
That brings a lot of things together, right? That's way more than just comms. That's vehicle tactics, and man, you got to have navigation, and there's a lot going on there. That's a great exercise.
Oh yeah. Hey,
maybe have a breakdown. You got to go fix a flat tire on the way, and
pull somebody out of the ditch. Yeah. Tag just dropped in here. Tag, it's good to see you. And Chase Peoples is in here too.
Hey Chase, so. I met Chase. I don't think I met Tag yet. He answered a question of mine about ICF on a different live stream a few weeks back with John, but I look forward to meeting Tag. He seems like a cool guy.
Tag is a good guy. I did an interview with him and then got to meet him in person at SRF. So we hung out for quite a while. He actually introduced me to Porterhouse.
Okay. So, I haven't met Porterhouse either.
Oh, you need to talk to him.
People to meet.
Oh, yeah.
I spent the entire SRF at my little 6-foot table slinging radios for 2 days straight. So I missed everything, but it was well worth it. I met a lot of great people and made some great friends. But
but it
didn't get out much.
But our little exercise we're planning, it's going to be a fun thing. I'm really looking forward to it. So,
and how receptive are your crew to that? Like, are they taking it seriously, or they think it's silly? I mean, I know sometimes people roll their eyes about stuff like that, or do you have a pretty good crew of people that are willing to?
We hadn't. There's only been 3 of us that have talked about it, so I kind of broke the news. I kind of broke the news just now. Whoever's watching it's in the group, but we're planning that. I think the guys will be pretty receptive to it, and we've talked about doing some stuff like that, running extractions and stuff like that, kind of some mock stuff like that. Yeah. And the guys seem interested in it. I just you don't want to keep everything so tactical that you just get lost. You get lost in the tactical weeds. But
for sure,
I mean, if you're going to be running back and forth to somebody's house in a grid down situation, you've got to know a little bit of tactics and stuff like that. But it'll be fun. I mean, you're, like you said, you're encompassing a bunch of different stuff all in one weekend. You got comms, you got tactical maneuvers, convoys, just navigation, all that kind of stuff.
Yep. Police interactions, apparently.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, it would be our luck we'd wind up on the news. 15 guys kitted out in multicam and guns are all rolling down the road doing something. So, but I mean, there's fun stuff like that. I mean, with our group, we have weekends every so often. I mean, most of the time the guys will come down to the house and stay all weekend, and we just do a few seminars and stuff like that. Cool. People will present classes and stuff like that. Oh yeah. And Top, before he sold his place, he had a stinking awesome place over in Estill County, and we were going to do a whole bug out weekend at his place. Cool. He had it planned out that that everybody, he had essentially planned out that everybody was going to bug out to his place, and he was going to send out a group message of, hey, it's time, the balloon went up. And you were responding, I'm going to have, like with me, it would be Jason plus 3. So that would be me, and I was bringing 3 people with me.
Yeah.
And then we would try to establish as the closer we got, we'd try to establish communications, radio communications.
That's cool.
He was going to have somebody stationed at the gate, and
Okay.
you would call in once you got close to the gate of his place. Call in, say Jason plus 3 is en route. We're 2 miles away, coming up on the gate. And we've got, and he was going to assign certain people would have something going on. We've got a burn victim, possible, like possible 2nd-degree burns on his arm and right side. So you would check in at the gate. The guy at the gate would be, calling back saying, hey, Jason plus 3's here. We got 2nd-degree burns. Go get the medics ready. So. Hey, Grumpy Acres, it's glad to have you in here. He just got in here.
Cool.
So
I think those practical, that same philosophy applies to all that, right? Like from earlier, is practice it when times are good. And of course, you don't want to take yourself too seriously. Like we all kind of cringe at those guys that are too serious. But then again, you got to take it serious enough to say, I'm going to kind of suspend my current frame of reference, right? Like I'm going to kind of get in the mindset of this is real. I'm going to go through it as if it's real for the sake of learning and, roll through it when times are good, when you have a chance to mess up and not die, right? That's always nice to get to learn lessons and not die. So, that applies to a lot of different stuff. I think not just comms, not just gun stuff, not just medical stuff, right? It's all of it. So.
Oh yeah, and
I love that.
And we've done some stuff at one of the other guys' houses. He's hosted a couple weekend things, and it's and when I host the weekend things, the guys usually camp out in the shop. We've got a wood stove in the shop. We've got an off-grid bathroom and everything. The guys use that, and you can test your systems. Yeah, I can build an awesome off-grid bathroom, put in a cool wood stove. Yeah. And all that stuff, and it looks great on paper. But then when in a grid down situation, it's like, hey, 4 or 5 more people are coming, and then we figure out that the water filters aren't worth a shit down there for the bathroom. So we're testing the systems. And the guy the guys that hosted before, he is like, we're going to test the systems and see how it works if we've got an additional 12 people coming to my place. So it's all just dry runs, and worst case scenario, we all wind up in somebody's house instead of out in the shop for the weekend.
Yeah, I like that. And you're building bonds with those people too. It's like that. There's so many people that don't have good relationships with their neighbors or with their supposed community because they don't do anything together, right? Like you got to spend time with people, solve problems together. And comms, bringing it back to what I do, not to toot the horn of that too much, but it fits into everything. That's what's so important about it, is basically anything you do, comms helps. Yeah. I talked to a guy last week who used to be an electrician, and he said, I wish we would have had these when I was an electrician. When we were pulling wire, it would have saved me so many headaches to just tell the guy to stop.
Yep.
Instead of breaking, a $3,000 pull of wire, I don't know much about it, but I just assume it's expensive stuff. You're pulling copper down a big long tube and it gets kinked or it gets snapped because you can't yell loud enough. If you could just quietly say into your radio, hey, slow down, it might have saved you a lot of heartache. And that's, I just love to see that it really could fit in so many places. So.
Oh yeah, exactly. And one of the cool things I've got, my dad actually gave me, he had 2 field phones, and we're going to hook field phones up.
I don't know anything about that. What's that?
The Army field phones, like they used to use it. all it takes, these take 2D batteries, and
Okay.
it's got a little crank on it, and you essentially any 2-wire wire will work for those things.
Okay.
And
What
it,
kind of
it
distance?
I think Top said, I don't know if it's the 312 or not. It takes 2D batteries, but I don't know the distance.
I mean, like a ballpark, is it hundreds
I
of feet or miles, or I don't have a clue.
I think it's miles.
Wow, that's cool.
All right, there it is. Top said unlimited because of the wire.
Wow,
So
that's really cool.
And I know it's pretty much miles. Some of them, the voice activated ones, I don't think will go as far. They've got some that are just voice powered.
I see.
So
I mean, so it's essentially a telephone. You own
yeah,
the wire instead of the telephone company owning it.
yeah, yeah. Right there. Tag said that he's used the 312 long distance, but requires a speaker wire. So,
huh.
And Top says they suck, but oh well.
Well, I mean, in theory, it sounds cool. I mean, people had a lot harder time solving these problems years ago. We got it made.
Oh yeah. So
And especially just look at battery technology. Like, man, we can carry around power that would have it just what they had even 10 years ago pales in comparison to this like lithium iron phosphate stuff. I don't know if you are into that, but I've been amazed at what's possible these days.
Oh yeah, I mean it's crazy the batteries, and just think, I mean you're carrying around your phone, you're carrying around a supercomputer that fits in your hand
that can run all day.
Yeah, all day long on a charge. I mean 10 years ago that thing would have been the size of a freaking 12-inch concrete block or bigger probably
for equal performance for sure. Yeah.
Well,
and like me and my wife built a van to take to Alaska before we had kids, and I put an AGM battery in it, like a big old 100 amp hour. I guess it was 100 amp hour, I want to say, but it had all these restrictions. You can't discharge it more than 50% or you're going to damage it, and you couldn't charge it at more than a certain amount of amperage or you're going to damage it. All these things you had to be careful about. And I just got back into solar this past year, and I go look up what you get now, and it's these lithium iron phosphate batteries. You can charge them with you could put 100 amps into this battery and discharge it to 0 3,000 times before it even starts to have a problem. And it's like a whole new universe. It's amazing. And they're light. They don't weigh anything. You can turn them upside down. They won't leak. It's like, man, we got it made.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I've not jumped into much lithium yet. So
okay.
I'm going
I highly recommend it. It's amazing. And they're not that expensive.
With the Man Portable, I've got a Yaesu 891 HF rig that I'm going to put together. And I'll have to use a lithium battery for it. If not, you're going to be hauling around a dang freaking deep cycle marine batteries.
Bioenno batteries. You can probably get away with a 9 amp hour or 12 amp hour for that. It has a pretty big current draw on that 891. I think it's about 20 amps at 100 watts. But yeah, I mean, the fact that you can get a little 2-pound battery that'll run that huge radio at 100 watts is amazing. So.
Oh yeah, and I've watched some of the guys. There's a guy, I forgot his stinking YouTube channel. He does most of his stuff all off grid, and I mean he's out in the wilderness and he's running HF stuff, and he's got the batteries and the little flexible solar panels and all that. And I've learned a lot from watching his channel.
Is it the guy in Sweden that you're talking about?
I think he might be. I don't know. He might be. I'm not 100% sure.
I think it's like OH8SPN he's amazing.
Yes.
Yeah. All low power QRP stuff with, man, have you looked up what those solar panels cost that he uses? My mind was completely blown.
It's no telling.
Because I think they're called Power Film, But what I didn't know is they're super lightweight. Like they were like a blanket. Like
Really?
most of the flexible stuff is still pretty stout. You know, the stuff that's affordable that you can get. But I've got like, I don't have it handy. I've got a 100-watt panel that's like a briefcase, you know, but it's only like a 60-watt panel and it's huge. And it's like $2,000. I was like,
God.
what? But I think it's because it's so lightweight and flexible, you know, for those backpacker types that ounces are king, you know, but it's still cool that you can do that, but out of my price range for sure.
Well, we just need to get them to sponsor us and send us a couple for free.
Yeah, I haven't had any sponsor offers yet. I think I'm a little too ugly for that line of work. I'll leave that to you, though. I bet you'll be successful. Your beard's a little nicer.
I'll find somebody to sponsor me and give me a free solar panel. I don't care. So Tag said that he's got the phosphate batteries, and then Top said the 891 at 100 watts is 1.5 amp hours per hour. So I think it might be just on listening. I saw one guy. I know Yaesu, a guy did a video on the 891. I think it says 23 amps at 100 watts. And he actually put a meter on it, and I think it was only drawing like 18 amps at 100 watts.
Oh, that's good, because the amp draw is what your limitation is on those small batteries. They could run it a while, but on receive, but they won't be able to give you full power. So if it's under 20, that opens up a lot of options.
Yeah.
Typically, what I've seen is the amperage rating on the battery. If it's a 20 amp hour battery, it has a 20 amp maximum current draw.
Okay.
So it'll trip, or it won't allow you to draw past that sometimes.
Oh yeah. Top does a lot of the POTA, the Parks on the Air stuff. Yeah.
That's like basically, I heard one of the guys that came by my booth was saying that you're unknowingly kind of setting up for a bug out, right? With POTA. It's like you're taking all your stuff to a park, setting it up for the first time in a new environment and getting it to work.
Yeah.
All those guys are bug out practicers, whether they know it or not. They're literally just over and over setting up as if, I mean, I don't think a lot of those guys think of it that way. They just have fun with it, but they're practicing for emergency preparedness.
Oh yeah, exactly.
People probably don't know what POTA is.
Yeah. But POTA is Parks on the Air. Essentially, they're going to state and national parks and setting up, doing their ham set up there and making contacts. And
it's a contest, essentially, right? Like you get a certain number of contacts, gives you bragging rights, or
yeah, I think you get some kind of certificates or something like that.
Yeah.
Of course, Top, he's old and retired, and he's got time to do all that stuff. Watch, he'll come back with something snarky, be like, "I'm not old." So
those ham radio guys love their certificates.
Yes.
And they love to tell me I'm charging too much money too. That's about the only critique I get from other hams is I can buy that same thing for less money. I just want to give them a virtual high five.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, the funniest thing, talking about how old some of the ham guys are, when I went to the first ham fest I ever went to, I walked in and I'm like, man, I'm the youngest dude in here. And my second thought was, next year I'm bringing hover rounds and renting them.
Yeah. I'm surprised they weren't already there.
Yeah. I mean, I'm like,
most of them I see, it's right on the main page where you can rent your scooter.
Yeah. I was like, I'm going to rent these scooters to these guys.
Oh, man. That's a sad truth for sure.
Oh, yeah. Well, the bad thing is it is kind of a dying people. There's not, and I think the whole preparedness movement and everything is brought new life into ham radio. And,
well, you would think it's dying if you went to Hamfest.
Yeah.
But YouTube is what is making it not die.
Yeah.
The registrations are up since about the year, I think around 2007. It just took off. Basically, with the internet and with YouTube, technician licenses are at an all-time high.
Yeah. And I'll be honest with you, if it wasn't for being in the preparedness stuff.
Yeah, that's your thing.
Yeah, well, I mean, I would not do anything with ham radio.
Really?
Yeah, if it was not for the preparedness aspect that I'm into, I
Yeah,
would be
that's
out of
fair.
ham radio and just don't care anything about it. I would be doing something else. But now I kind of see it as like, oh, I'm glad I picked this up though.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I walked that same road being the youngest guy. When I first got mine, they were like overjoyed to have somebody come take a test that, didn't have an AARP card.
yeah. Oh yeah, well, Grumpy said, Lord, at 53, I was the youngest one on the local repeater by 15 years.
Yeah. And I think where the activity is more like APRS and digital modes and all the cool new hotness that the YouTube guys like Ham Radio Crash Course, and they're revitalizing it and coming out with new cool stuff that all the younger nerds are into. But I don't. If it wasn't for YouTube, I think it would be over.
Oh
And
yeah,
the argument, I have heard a good argument for licensing because of that, is it does let the FCC know that there's interest.
yes,
Because eventually, if people weren't getting licenses, how else do they know that we want to keep those bands, right?
yeah,
So it is valid to let them know, hey, we want this stuff. We're using this stuff. Please keep it reserved for hams.
yeah.
They don't have to do that. So,
oh yeah, I mean, if not, they take those bands away and sell them.
of course, there's
So,
only so many frequencies. So, business, you pay for a business license, that creates a lot more revenue than $30 ham tests.
oh yeah. Well, Arthur said that when he was studying for his, you still had to do code was a requirement, and I think that's
that was a couple centuries ago, I think.
Yeah, I know that. Yeah, no kidding. I'm glad they dropped it too, because I think that helped out a lot. So
that did. I mean, I complain. I guess early on in the stream, I was complaining, but that'd be a whole new level of barrier to entry.
Oh, it would. I don't even know if I would have a license then. So
I probably wouldn't. I don't think. I mean, if I set my mind to it, I would. I don't think I would have set my mind to it. That's a lot to learn.
Oh yeah, I would have stopped. I would have if you would still had to do code. I would have stopped when you had to whatever level you had to do the code for. I would have stopped before I got that. And I agree 100% with Grumpy. He said the preppers that say they don't want the government to know my business drive me nuts. Go get your license. I agree. I mean, it's like we said before. I mean, if you're on a stinking smartphone and you got YouTube and you got Facebook, the government already knows everything they want.
Yeah. If that's the reason you're not getting it, that's bullcrap. If it's because you're principled and you say, I shouldn't need a license, it's freedom of speech, I can get on board with that kind of attitude, but not anonymity. You're not anonymous in 2022. Unless you're anonymous, like you would really know because you're Jason Bourne or something, but you're not. So,
oh yeah, I mean, just go get your stinking license. I mean, it's not that hard. Just go do it and be done.
I think it's harder than you let on, though, man. I've got a lot of pretty intelligent people that are not. They're not willing. Maybe if they put their mind to it. I do think there's a lot of people that need to use comms that are not capable of passing that test.
Everybody in our group that's went to take it has done fine with it and passed it.
You just got smart people. Have you been out there and met these people walking around driving cars and?
Yeah, I've been to Walmart a couple times.
They can't even make change if you pay in cash. I don't think they can tell me what the maximum allowed power is on 60 meters, or I mean, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's there. I don't think everybody can do it.
Well, it was crazy. The girl talking about making change. The girl the other day, she was making change, and she looked at me and she goes, "Is 8 + 8 16?"
Oh my gosh!
And I looked at my 7-year-old, and he goes, "Yeah, that's right." And I'm like, God, I just face planted. I'm like, this is what's going on here. So,
but that person, to be fair, in an emergency, they still need to talk to people.
Yes.
And I think it's a disservice to require them to pass a pretty technical test to be able to talk to people in an emergency, right? Like, and GMRS is the place for that person, right? Like, pay your fee and get your license and you're good to go. I thank God we've got that option, but there are a lot of people that need comms that are not, they either cannot or will not take that test.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And I think one of the problems is, well, one of the things is with the HF stuff, the entry fee to get into HF, it starts getting expensive too. So once you start getting into your HF, it's a lot more investment that you're going to have to put in there.
I usually tell people $1,000 for a pretty decent setup for HF, and that's if you already have a way to power it, right? If you got to get batteries or a power supply, that's even more. But yeah, for an antenna and a decent rig and a tuner, but you don't have to have a tuner. But yeah, that's something I recently learned that's kind of helpful, is realizing how unnecessary tuners are. It was always told to me that was a requirement, but if you just get resonant antennas, you can save yourself the money. And a tuner is really just fooling the radio to think that the antenna is okay. It doesn't make it much better. It just makes it usable. So
yeah. And I watched some of those videos that you're talking about. And well, I mean, the Chameleon antenna that I've got, it says no tuner required.
Yeah, it's probably resonant on 5 or 6 bands.
Yeah, and I've done it. Now I've done it without tuning it and tuning it, and it worked fine with no tuner.
Yep.
So
now, if you're trying to tune some random piece of wire to work and you don't want to blow your radio up, yeah, you probably need a tuner. But and I'm sure there's arguments to be made for it from smarter people than me. But it's kind of cool. Also, if you're trying to pack light, that's a big thing to carry. Usually, a tuner is almost as big as the radio. So it's good to eliminate that. Just build a dipole for each band, or build a linked dipole that you can clip, start at 10 meters and add lengths to it and label them. A little more tedious, but cheaper and probably a lot more reliable.
Oh yeah. And if you're going with the NVIS stuff, I mean, really the only thing you need is 40 and 80 meters.
Yeah.
I mean, that's usually what they're running on. 40.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, I would much rather pack those antennas. I mean, a 40 meter, if you pack an extra antenna, is going to be a lot less weight than packing a tuner.
Yeah, 63-foot wire, I think, is what my 40-meter in-fed half wave uses. So
yeah, so
yeah, I don't think it's cheap. So that's certainly worth mentioning. Is it's the technical barrier to entry and the financial one. I think starting with handhelds and get your feet wet and. But if you consider comms as important as a rifle or a vehicle, I would rank it right up there. $1,000 is nothing for that kind of stuff. So
yeah,
make it a priority. Start setting aside $50 a month until you got the money. I mean, that's a simple discipline that too few people have. Is just like, I've never had a financial goal that I couldn't determined to meet if I just put my mind to it, right? Even on a modest income, just have discipline.
Yeah.
So you're going to do what's important to you, though. If you like drinking beer on the weekends and you can't give it up, but you can't afford a radio, you might have to get your priorities in order.
Oh yeah, no doubt. Well, Evan, we've been going on about an hour and 15 minutes.
Holy moly.
I know. Yeah. I know you're an hour ahead of me too, and you probably want to get some sleep. So,
I appreciate you having me on. Sorry to talk your ear off. I could go all day on this stuff.
Oh yeah, I could sit here all night and talk about it until the sun came up. But I tell everybody how they can get a hold of you once again.
Yes,
and everything.
Sir. Well, you guys can go to our website, radiomadeeasy.com. Our email is hello@radiomadeeasy.com. I'm Evan, and when I say we, it's just my family runs this business, me and my wife. Might raise my kids up to help with shipping here soon, but just small company based in North Carolina. And if you guys want to come out and see us at the Self-Reliance Festival in March, I believe it's the 23rd of March or somewhere in there, go to selfreliancefestival.com. I'd love to meet you in person. Come buy something from me or just come shake my hand. And if you need anything at all, if you are looking for something that you're trying to solve a problem you don't know how to solve, hit us up. We do consultations and trainings and anything we can do to help you get to effective use of radios. That's our job. So look forward to talking to you.
All right, guys, I appreciate all of you in here. We had some good questions. We had some good chat going in here. And I appreciate everything, and we'll be having Evan on again. If there's any questions y'all want to know, anything y'all want us to cover, throw them in the comments after the live's over, and we'll try to do them next time. So, but I appreciate it, and y'all have a good night.
All right, take care.